This past week, we lost Charlie Kirk to one of the most egregious acts of political violence that our nation has ever seen. A lot of us are hurting. We're trying to figure out how to operate in this new America, an America where simply holding the wrong political opinion can be treated like a killable offense. We're trying to process what it means to live and work and even go to school alongside people who didn't just stay silent, but actually celebrated the assassination of a young father because they didn't like how he voted. I wish I had the answers. I wish I knew how to fix this country and heal these divisions. But what I do know is this: we cannot give up. We have to keep fighting for the values and ideals that Charlie literally died defending. The worst thing that we can do in times like this is to let the darkness win. Yes, we grieve. Yes, we pray for his family, but we also keep going. We keep fighting for the values that he stood for. And part of that is remembering that not everything is doom and gloom, okay? There is good news worth celebrating. So that's what today's episode is about. I wanted to take 1 week in the middle of all of this heaviness to only share wins, real, tangible victories that remind us that we are not defeated, that there are reasons to be encouraged, and that progress is being made. So if you've been feeling worn down by the headlines, this episode is for you. It's a reminder that we still have plenty to fight for and plenty to celebrate. Let's get into this week's stories. All right, our first good news story today is straight from my home state. Missouri just finished its special session, and after a lot of back and forth, lawmakers passed a brand new congressional redistricting map. Now, I know that redistricting isn't like the sexiest word. It sounds like one of those boring civics class topics that you'd rather not think about, but hear me out, because what Missouri just did isn't just good news for my state, it's good news for the country. Here's the bigger picture. Multiple states across the country have been redrawing their maps. If you've been paying attention to the news in recent weeks, then you know this. Texas went first and added more Republican seats, then California went the other direction and carved out more Democrat seats, and now Missouri has stepped up, passed its new map, and added one more Republican seat. And I get it, one seat doesn't sound like a lot, but next year's midterm elections could literally come down to one or two races, which means that this single seat could be the difference between a Speaker Hakeem Jeffries and Speaker Mike Johnson. It could be the difference between Trump having a Congress that actually helps him govern or a Congress that stonewalls everything that he tries to do. So let's talk about what Missouri actually did here, okay? First of all, this map that they passed is more compact, more contiguous, and it actually splits up fewer counties than the map that we currently have. You're not going to hear about that on MSNBC or CNN, okay? Don't believe the lies from the left that it's gerrymandered. And honestly, can we pause here for a second? Because I am so tired of hearing that buzzword. I don't think that liberals should even be allowed to use the word gerrymandered because half of them don't even know how to spell it. Okay, but back to the point. This map literally keeps more counties together. So, how on earth can you argue with a straight face that it is more divided? You can't. It is cleaner, it makes more sense, and it gives communities a stronger voice. And here's why this matters so much, because midterm elections are a year away. And if you know your political history, you know that the party that holds the White House almost always loses seats in the midterms. Not necessarily because people are angry at Trump or unhappy with what Republicans are doing, but because a lot of voters only show up in presidential years. Off-year turnout is always lower, especially for the party in power. And that's why having strong maps matters, because the left will show up. They always do. They'll pour in money from out-of-state donors, they'll fly in activists, they will do whatever it takes to flip a district. And if our side isn't ready, if we don't build in fair representation now, we risk losing control of Congress, even when most voters in a state like Missouri are with us. This new map is insurance. It is protection. It makes sure that the way Missourians actually vote is what shows up in Washington, D.C. And that is huge. Because if we want Trump to keep doing all of the good things that he's been doing, cutting spending, restoring law and order, securing the border, just pulling us back from the brink of chaos, we have to make sure he has a Congress that's on his side. He cannot do it alone. And this new Missouri map brings us one step closer to making sure that he has that majority. So, yes, I would call this a win. Missouri delivered. And if you ask me, it is exactly the kind of good news that all of us needed this week. So, what do you think? Do you think that more states should be taking up redistricting? What about your home state? Do you think that the congressional delegation that you send to DC accurately reflects the voter makeup in your state? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear from you. All right, let's keep the good news rolling. Earlier this month, a federal appeals court handed President Trump and Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem a major win on immigration. The court ruled that the administration can move forward with ending temporary protected status, also known as TPS, for about 430,000 migrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. Now let's pause on that number. 430,000 people. That's not a small humanitarian program. That's basically the population of Miami getting blanket legal status to live and work here, even though they never went through the legal immigration process. And the court actually agreed that the president has the authority to end it. The program was always meant to be temporary, not like a backdoor path to citizenship. Temporary, because here's the reality. These TPS designations started as short-term responses to crisis, okay? Like natural disasters, political upheaval, instability in other countries. And yes, America has always been generous, but what started as a temporary lifeline has turned into a permanent pipeline. Let me say that again. What started as a temporary lifeline has turned into a permanent pipeline. People come in under TPS, and instead of it lasting 18 months or 2 years like it was supposed to, it just keeps getting renewed over and over and over again. Some people have been here for decades under TPS. Like, at what point do we stop pretending that it's temporary? And here's why this ruling matters so much, because the left has been banking on the courts to block Trump at every turn. Every time that he takes a strong stand on immigration, they rush to find a judge in California or New York to put up a restraining order. But this time, the courts didn't bite. They said, yes, this administration has the authority to make this call. And that's a huge deal, because it means immigration policy is back in the hands of the people that we actually elect, not activist judges. And honestly, I think this ruling sends a bigger message too. It says that the era of pretending temporary programs are permanent is coming to an end, whether it's TPS or DACA or whatever other alphabet soup the left invents. Americans are tired of loopholes. Okay, we want a system that is fair, it is enforceable, and it doesn't reward people for cutting the line. Let's also talk about the politics here. Ending TPS doesn't mean that we're suddenly heartless or ignoring suffering abroad. It means we're recognizing that America cannot be the world's safety net forever. Okay, we are $30+ trillion in debt. We have homeless veterans sleeping on the streets. We have families struggling to buy groceries. And yet somehow we're supposed to feel guilty if we say, hey, maybe our resources should go to our own citizens first. Yo, that's not cruelty. That is common sense. Here's the bottom line. This ruling is good news because it restores order. It is a win for sovereignty. It's a reminder that words mean something. Temporary means temporary. And yes, politically, this is a boost for Trump ahead of the midterms, because the left is going to keep screaming that this is heartless, that families are being torn apart, and that America's compassion is dead. But the truth is, the more that they yell, the more normal Americans, the majority of us, nod our heads and say, yeah, actually, I don't want 500,000 people living here permanently under a loophole. This is one of those wins that shows you the tide is turning, that the courts are finally siding with the Constitution, that the administration is following through on promises, and Americans are getting a little bit of reassurance that maybe, just maybe, we're putting our own people first again. And in a week that has felt heavy and dark, I think that's something worth celebrating. What do you guys think? Are you glad that the courts are finally siding with common sense on immigration? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Okay, I wasn't going to do Hot Take Hotline this week because it is kind of a shorter episode, but this question is such a good one, I had to include it. A follower asked me, what are ways that young moms can get involved? Obviously, TPUSA is really great for high schoolers and college students, but what about those of us who are out of college? So here was my answer. There are a ton of places that you can plug in. Start with Moms for Liberty and Moms for America. Both are national organizations with local chapters, and they are laser focused on giving moms a voice in schools, in culture, and in government. There's also the National Federation of Republican Women and Young Women for America. These are great if you're looking for like a solid network of like-minded conservative women who are already doing real grassroots work. And don't forget about the TPUSA community chapters. A lot of people think that TPUSA is only for high school and college students because that is where they focus, but it's not entirely true. They have community chapters open to anyone, and you can still go to their big events like America Fest in December, even if you're not a student. The opportunities are out there. And here's the other thing, you don't have to wait for someone to hand you a microphone or create the perfect group for you. If you look around your community and think, man, I wish that there was a place for moms like me to connect or organize or study the Bible or talk politics without walking on eggshells, you can be the one to start it. That could look like a book club or maybe a weekly neighborhood prayer walk, a Facebook group for conservative moms in your area, or even just hosting like some kind of casual coffee once a month for women who share your values. 9 times out of 10, if you are craving that space, other women are too. They just haven't had the courage to make the first move. Filling that void is powerful. It doesn't have to be polished or perfect, it just has to exist. And when it does, people show up. That's how movements grow, that's how culture shifts. So, yes, join the national groups, plug into the networks that already exist, but also don't underestimate the impact of starting your own thing right where you are. So, here's what I want to know from you. If you are already plugged into one of these national groups that I mentioned, tell us about your experience in the comments. What's it been like? What do you love about it? Or if you're involved in another group that I didn't mention, drop it below and share, because the more ideas that we can trade here, the more moms we can connect and get involved. Okay, for years we've been told that faith in America is dying, that Gen Z's checked out, that millennials are more like spiritual than religious, and that Christianity is fading into the background. But the latest numbers tell a very different story. So Barna found that since 2019, Gen Z men have had a 15-point jump in their commitment to Jesus, and millennials have been even bigger, almost 20 points higher. The American Bible Society reports that Bible use among millennials is up 29% just this past year. And among men overall, scripture engagement jumped nearly 20%. So, no, Christianity isn't dying. If anything, it looks like a quiet resurgence is already in the works, and it's happening in the exact age groups and demographics that the media has written off. Now, that's the data, but here's where I think it gets even more real, because honestly, the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk this past week has shaken people. That is undeniable. It has made so many of us stop and ask bigger questions. I've seen post after post of people saying that for the first time in years, they're going to church this weekend because they're hurting and they're looking for answers, and they're realizing that the answers aren't in politics or social media or the next news cycle. They're turning to God. And I truly believe that this tragedy is going to accelerate what the data shows us is already in the works. I fully believe that Charlie Kirk will bring more people to Christ in his death than he ever did in his life. And that is saying something, because his life was dedicated to reaching young people with truth. But the way people are responding by searching and questioning and turning back to church, I don't think that's temporary. I think it's the beginning of something bigger. And I'll be honest with you, I'm including myself in that group. Since having kids, I haven't really prioritized actually going to church. The thought of getting my toddlers dressed and bribing them to behave and then sitting through service while counting down the minutes until it was time to pick them up from Sunday school, it felt more like a burden than a blessing. But this week, after Charlie's death, after the heaviness of all of it, I found myself back in a church pew because I don't have the answers. I don't know what any of this means, but what I do know is that Charlie Kirk said time and time again that he wanted to be most known for his faith. Not how many cabinet secretaries he had in his phone, not how many chapters he had of Turning Point USA, but his faith and his relationship with Jesus. So I figured while I'm searching for the answers, just like everyone else, maybe the best place to start looking is the exact spot that Charlie has been pointing us to all along. So, like I said, the data is already out there showing us that young people have been turning back to God. And I believe that the events of this past week are only going to speed that up because in the middle of darkness, people turn to the light. Charlie's legacy is going to live on through every single person who decides, I'm going back to church, I'm opening my Bible, I'm choosing God over despair. And if that's what happens and what comes out of this tragedy, then the enemy doesn't win. And that is good news. All right, y'all, I know it has been a heavy week this week, so I hope that these stories of good news have filled you with a little bit of hope. If you're looking for community and support and you haven't joined our Facebook group, I strongly encourage that you do. We have over 1,000 conservative women who are connecting with one another every single day and turning to each other for support. It's called Politigals. I'll make sure that it's linked here in the description of this episode so that you can check it out. If you're watching this episode on YouTube, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, drop a comment with your take on one of today's stories, and most importantly, hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss next week's episode. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, go ahead and follow the show there and leave a 5-star review. That's how we reach more conservative women and grow this community of people who are ready to call out the lies that the left never thought we'd question. I'm Erica Chwenka from Politics for Her, and I'll see you next Monday for more based behavior.